You know what you can look
sure.
at it
All the
like I
same
look at
shit.
your high school.
Mhm.
Out of, let's say, 3,000 people, how many people tried out for the football team? And then how many people were starters? And then how many people were stars?
Yeah.
Because the stars are the keepers, or potential keepers, right? And then maybe one of them actually makes it to the league.
Yeah, nah, for sure.
That's the
For
seed
sure.
hunt. So you start to, I always think about it like, okay, there were 600 people in my class and there was 32 on each side. So 64 people on the football, and you start to write, God, man.
When it comes to quality, it's dropped off a lot due to the overproduction of the plant. This is very similar to what we see when it comes to food. The overproduction of anything always leads to the downfall of the quality. It's just part of the process that is very hard to overcome. So, when we look at a lot of the stuff on the legal market, we get to see that a lot of it is not necessarily going to impress you, and there's a few reasons why. One of these reasons is because of the selections of phenotypes that they're actually using to run. This could be a term that might bore some people, but what it actually really means is very similar to your brothers and sisters. Your siblings are very, very different for good or bad reasons. It's up to you on your interpretation of that. But it's also very much something that is noticeable. And it's something that we can see when it comes to certain strains on the market. There's a few different ones that are very, very easily used as examples. So we're going to go over those ones. But this video, I truly believe, is going to help a lot of people understand why some of the different old school strains are just not going to be living up to the memory unless they get brought back by those people who were growing it to that level or had access to the certain pheno that was the shining star. Before we fully get into it, let's give some examples on some certain strains that really paint the picture for me. The strain that I love to refer to when speaking about this topic is Mac 1. We see that the cap cut Mac 1, Capulator's cut of the Mac 1 is the prized gem of all Mac 1s. There isn't any other Mac 1s that are even nearly comparable because they all have lots of flaws. We could say it like that for sure. The Capulator's cut, it is definitely going to have this intense, very intense high to it. And it's also going to be something that is somewhat noticeably different even in the looks. So, I'm going to pull up a picture of it right now. As you can see, this is the Capulator's cut, and then this is the one that you would probably see in a dispensary. There are a lot of different ones going around. There was just this Harvest Cup this past weekend, and they had a lot of different Mac 1s on the shelves that you could see and see the differences of. I wasn't there, but I got to see a lot of videos. I did see this one video of a fake one, and it's noticeably different just off the look. Of course, you could tell from the Mac 1, the trichomes are very, very noticeable. It is going to be popping out major, and it is also going to be this very tightly structured nug that is not very much similar to the appearance of most other strains. It has its own look to it, and there's a lot more details that I'm not mentioning right now, so let me mention those. When I say tightly structured, it does definitely have that mountain range appearance to it. It's not going to have that full PGR LED look where it's going to be almost stones, but what it's going to have is this very tight structure to it where everything is very much packed in. You're going to have trichomes that are scattered all over it, but they're all very close together, and it's almost going to give this whitish appearance. Of course, you will have batches that are going to have some purple, and those ones definitely are going to have some very funky, weird, cookie-ish taste, but it's almost like this funky cookie that is just mind-blowing. It is definitely a miracle alien cookie. The name of it makes a lot of sense when you actually try it. That being said though, this strain has such a unique appearance when you look at the caps cut versus the more watered down dispensary versions that you're gonna get. Those are still technically Mac 1s. They're just the different phenos. So maybe it's not necessarily a Mac 1, maybe it's going to be a Mac 11, a Mac whatever. I've heard that those different phenos, the Mac 11 was actually a really good one. The Mac 1 is the Capulator's cut, if I'm not mistaken, and there was just a few different phenos in that selection that were prized possessions, but there's also a large amount of them that were more or less just worker strains, and we can discuss what worker strains are once we get into talking about gelato, which we could just talk about now. Gelato is one that has many different phenos. We can talk about the 33, and that is easily the one that a lot of people look to be the prized gold of taste. That one has an amazing candy but fruit taste that is just mind-blowing when you actually experience it. But it's also something that if you take it and compare it to the 42, which is very different but similar, it's very different. It has a very musky, more shaving cream type of smell or taste, which is going to be very appealing to some crowds. Some people actually really enjoy the 41 or the 42 a lot more than they would the 33, but there's so many other selections within that gelato range. Side note, I sort of glossed over talking about what worker strains are. I want to actually shed a light on what worker strains really are. Of course, it sounds as if they don't have a huge purpose, but they do have a big role. There's some strains that are very, very popular because they are the parents of these shining stars. And there's a lot of different examples. We could look at cookies and cream as being one of those ones that isn't necessarily super great, but has been able to create some really great things. There's a lot of different ones. That one may not be the best example, but there's a lot of examples out there. I'm going to show a few different ones on the screen at the moment. And this is definitely something that a lot of people will talk about being very useful for knowing how to use certain things. And gelato is a strain that has so many different ones that are used in so many different ways. There's runts that we see was made with the 33. The candy fruitness that comes off of the 33 is perfect for making runts. But also 41 is in the creation of a lot of really funky, interesting strains as well. So it's definitely, it's a hard thing to say that any strain isn't really a golden child. There's purposes for everything, but there's always going to be the ones that kind of stand out a bit. That's why everyone, when they talk about gelato, they always talk about the 33, they always talk about the 41, and they leave out all of the other ones, which is unfortunate because there's so many very beautiful ones within that bunch. There's also a lot of ones that are kind of just wasted times in a way. So the 41 definitely is one that will shine a light on the more funky side.
The 33 shines a light definitely on that candy fruitness where it's just going to be mouth-watering. But that 41 is going to slap you upside the head. So it's definitely a very unique strain that gets to show you a great example of what phenotypes really are. But there's so much more that goes into it. So let's get further into it.
There's ones that are leaning in certain directions. And why is this? Why are some of them leaning in certain directions more than the other? It's basically the same reason why, if you have siblings, not everyone's going to be exactly the same. Some are going to have different characteristics that are going to shine brighter than others. Some of them are going to be better at sports. Some are going to be better at books and the whole financial scene. So why is this? Is this because of the experiences in life and just life experiences? Yes, of course. It's the same reason why what medium you use or what nutrients you're actually feeding the plant is actually going to play a role. It's the same thing as if a kid goes to a private school but is entertaining themselves with graphic, very violent things, it could lead to a negative situation. Or if that kid that goes to private schools actually is into Shakespeare, into all of these things that are going to further them down the path of success, it could lead to something great, something pure, and something that is going to be maybe a keeper's cut, as they say. So there's a lot of factors that plays into what is actually going to make greatness, but that is a reality we have to definitely take into account when we're spending money on these certain cuts or seeds. You really have to know, is this breeder someone who's working with the right cuts? Is this someone who's actually going down that line where it's actually going to have potential? Or is this just going to be a very, very tough chase? Both could have success. You never know. You could start at the bottom, make it all the way to the top. So it's not necessarily good to write it off right away, but to have the knowledge of what you're getting into is a big piece of the puzzle.